Dr. Elias Ward barely felt the sting as the jagged edge of the monolith sliced into his palm. He had been too focused on the alien script, the way it shimmered as though trying to escape his gaze. But when his blood dripped onto the stone, the carvings moved, the symbols twisting and reshaping themselves before his eyes. The air around him hummed with unseen energy. His skin prickled, and the sensation of something vast and unseen pressed against his mind. Then the words formed. Humanity stands alone. A storm approaches. Only blood shall awaken the weapon. Only war shall forge the chosen. Ward staggered back, his breathing shallow. The other archaeologists stared, their expressions shifting from curiosity to outright fear. Dr. Helena Voth, the team's exobiologist, whispered, Did that just rewrite itself? Before Ward could respond, the ground shook beneath them. Dust cascaded from the cavern ceiling. The monolith pulsed, as if in answer to some distant, silent call. Then their comms crackled with static. This is Humor Orbital Station to all ground teams. We have static. Incoming contacts. Unknown vessels inbound. A second, sharper tremor hit, this time from above. Explosions thundered across the surface. The sky had turned to fire. Ward's heart pounded. They had barely begun to process the artifact's revelation. And now, what? An invasion? A cover-up? Had someone been waiting for this moment? Move. Helena snapped, grabbing a field pack and slinging it over her shoulder. We need to get to the shuttle. Ward hesitated for a fraction of a second, his gaze flicking back to the slab. The text was still there, glowing faintly. A warning, a prophecy, but no time for answers. They sprinted out of the cavern, racing through the winding tunnels of the dig site as the bombardment above intensified. Explosions rocked the landscape, sending plumes of ash and fire into the sky. The research outpost, once a hub of careful scientific discovery, was now a war zone. Their shuttle was already prepped for takeoff, but as they approached, a black shape dropped from the sky, sleek, armored, and unmistakably alien. The first shot took out the landing pad. The second killed the pilot before she could scream. The Halothi had arrived. Ward and the others skidded to a halt as 6 towering figures emerged from the wreckage, dark, insectile, with cruelly sharp armor and glowing, predator-like eyes. The nearest one tilted its head as if studying them. Then it raised its weapon. The prophecy had already begun, and humanity's fate was being written in blood. The first shot came without warning. A crack of searing plasma ripped through the dust-choked air, missing Ward's head by inches. He dove for cover behind the wreckage of a supply crate. His breath ragged as more bolts of energy sizzled past. The Halothi moved with a terrifying precision, their armor glinting under the fire-lit sky. They weren't just here to kill. They were erasing evidence. Dr. Helena Voth was already pulling a sidearm from her pack, her scientist's hand suddenly steady as steel. Run or fight, Ward. Pick one. Ward clenched his jaw. Running meant death. Fighting was the only option. He grabbed the pistol from the fallen pilot's holster and snapped off 3 shots. The energy rounds pinged off the nearest Salothi's armor, barely leaving a scratch. It turned toward him with something disturbingly close to amusement. Oh, hell. Then, from the ridge above, a sudden explosion rocked the battlefield. A dropship came screaming out of the clouds, twin autocannons chewing through the ground forces. The impact flung Ward backward as fire and shrapnel tore through the air. The comm in his ear crackled to life. Get to the ship. Now. Ward didn't hesitate. He scrambled to his feet, dragging Helena with him as they sprinted toward the descending dropship. The Salothi were already regrouping. One leaped onto a nearby boulder, raising an arm that snapped open like a blade. It lunged. A sniper round took its head off midair. The pilot, Lieutenant Rourke, a battle-hardened Marine, leaned out of the ship's open bay, rifle still smoking. Get the hell in. Ward threw himself into the bay, barely clearing the ramp as the ship lifted off. Helena landed beside him, breathing hard. The last thing Ward saw before the doors slammed shut was the monolith, now surrounded by Xalothi soldiers. Then, as the ship accelerated into the upper atmosphere, the monolith began to glow. The Xalothi backed away, not in reverence, but fear. Ward barely had time to process the sight before the viewports flashed white. A beam of crimson energy erupted from the monolith, lancing into the sky like a beacon. A signal. The Xalothi hadn't come to retrieve the slab. They had come to stop whatever it was calling. "Jump to FTL," Rourke barked. Now, the ship's engines roared, and in a flash of starlight, they were gone, leaving behind a burning world and a prophecy written in Ward's own blood. The storm had begun. Ward sat in the dropship's dimly lit hold, his hands still slick with blood, some his, some from the dead pilot he hadn't been able to save. The adrenaline had worn off, leaving his body shaking and his mind racing. Across from him, Lieutenant Rourke was barking orders into his comm. "Get the fleet on alert. We have a Category 1 engagement. Unknown hostiles. Repeat, unknown hostiles with advanced tech." Dr. Helena Vose sat beside Ward, staring at the dried blood on his palm. "It changed when you touched it," she said, her voice tight. "The monolith. The writing. The prophecy." Ward exhaled, his head throbbing. He had spent his life debunking ancient alien superstitions, and now he was living one. "What does that mean?" he muttered. Before she could answer, the ship's cockpit chimed. "FTL exit in 10 seconds. The pilot called back. Approaching Erebus Station." Erebus was one of humanity's outermost black sites, a research station orbiting a dying star. If there was anywhere in the galaxy it could decipher the monolith's message, it was here. The ship lurched out of FTL. Erebus Station came into view, a massive construct of steel and shadow, its hull dotted with sensor arrays and defensive turrets. The dying sun it orbited cast a sickly red glow over everything. But something was wrong. The station wasn't responding. "Erebus, this is the Aegis 7, requesting immediate clearance," the pilot hailed. "Erebus, respond." Silence. Then static. Then a whisper. "Blood calls to blood. The storm is near." Ward's skin crawled. The whisper hadn't come from the comms. It had come from inside his own head. Before he could speak, a new alert blared through the cockpit. Something just came out of slip space. Ward turned toward the viewport and felt his stomach drop. A Xalothi warship, black and insectoid, was drifting toward them, its hull scared and torn, as if it had just survived a battle. But there was no energy signature, no life signs, no weapons locking on. "Dead. Hold position," Rourke ordered, gripping his rifle. "Scan that thing." The ship's AI pulsed a response. No life forms detected. Minimal power signatures. Hull breach on starboard side. Then came the final scan result. Warning. Presence of non-human organic material detected. Unknown origin. Ward's gut twisted. The Xalothi weren't the ones inside that ship anymore. Something else was. Then, from the void, a new transmission crackled through. "The swarm is coming." The ship's lights flickered. And Ward knew whatever was hunting humanity had just taken its first step into the war. A heavy silence filled the Aegis 7 as the ghostly transmission crackled through the comms. "The swarm is coming." Ward swallowed hard, staring at the darkened wreck of the Xalothi warship. His pulse hammered in his ears. The Xalothi had been relentless, hunting them across the stars. Yet here was one of their own vessels, gutted and lifeless. Something had killed them. Something worse. Lieutenant Rourke took immediate command. "We're docking. Helm, put us in a tight orbit. I want a full scan on that ship. Helena, Ward, you're with me." The Aegis 7 maneuvered carefully toward the Xalothi vessel. As they approached the gaping hull breach, the full damage became clearer. Jagged scars tore through its armor, not from weapons fire, but something organic. The edges of the breach were lined with what looked like petrified tendrils, frozen in a grotesque grasp. Ward felt a whisper slide through his mind, low and distant. A voice. Blood calls to blood. The moment his boots hit the Xalothi ship's deck, the whisper grew louder. Work moved ahead with precision, sweeping the area with his rifle's flashlight. The corridors were eerily intact. No scorch marks, no battle damage. Just emptiness. And then they found the first body. A Xalothi warrior, still in full armor, impaled against the bulkhead by a black, spined growth. His body was drained, skin pulled tight over bone. Whatever had killed him had fed. A cold dread settled in Ward's gut. Then the station's comms crackled to life. Unidentified human vessel. This is the Aeon Concord. You have trespassed on restricted space. Power down immediately or be destroyed. Ward's stomach dropped. The Aeon Concord, a coalition of the oldest and most powerful alien civilizations, species that had existed long before humanity had ever reached the stars. And they were treating them like an enemy. Work cursed under his breath. What the hell are they doing out here? Helena stiffened. They knew. She turned to Ward, eyes sharp with realization. The Xalothi weren't here to stop us. They were trying to contain whatever killed them. The whispers in Ward's skull became a roar. The storm is near. Then, a movement in the dark. A shadow shifted at the far end of the corridor, something inhuman and wrong. The flashlight beams flickered as the walls themselves seemed to pulse. Rourke, we have to go. Now. Ward's voice was barely above a whisper. But before they could retreat, the Aeon Concord opened fire. A blinding explosion rocked the ship as the first energy lance tore through the Xalothi wreck. The Aeons weren't here to negotiate. They weren't here to save them. They were here to bury the truth. And they were willing to kill every last human to do it. The Aeon Concord's opening salvo ripped through the Xalothi warship, sending shockwaves that threw Ward off his feet. Sparks erupted from ruptured conduits, filling the corridor with thick, acrid smoke. The wreck was coming apart. Move, Rourke barked. He grabbed Ward by the collar and yanked him toward the breach. Helena was already ahead, sprinting through the crumbling ship as another blast sheared off an entire section behind them. Ward barely had time to register the movement in the dark. Something slithered in the corridor behind them. A shape. No, many shapes. Not Xalothi. Something else. The whispers in his skull screamed. Blood calls to blood. The old war never ended. The thing lunged. Ward saw only a blur of chitinous limbs before Work fired, unloading a full magazine of plasma rounds into the nightmare behind them. The thing shrieked, a sound so alien, so vast, that Ward felt it vibrate in his bones. Then he saw it, a monstrous, writhing mass of tendrils and jagged spines, shifting like liquid shadow, its many eyes burning like dying suns. It absorbed the plasma fire, growing stronger as it fed. The hell is that? Rourke snarled. Helena didn't look back. The reason the Xalothi died. The ship shuddered as another concussive blast rocked it from the outside. The Aeons were trying to destroy everything, to erase all evidence. The wreck was seconds from collapse. Ward sprinted toward the breach. If they missed the jump, they were dead. Rourke grabbed his comm. Pilot, get us the hell out of here. The Aegis 7 swung in low, its rear bay doors already open. The air howled as the ship's gravitational pull yanked at them. One by one, they jumped. Ward hit the ramp hard, rolling into the cargo bay. Rourke landed next, and Helena barely made it, her boots slipping as the Xalothi ship detonated behind them. The shockwave flipped the Aegis 7, alarms screaming as the pilot fought to stabilize the ship. Through the viewport, Ward saw the Aeon fleet watching. They hadn't even flinched at the explosion, because they had already won. The wreck was gone. The evidence destroyed. But Ward still heard the whispers. The old war never ended. Then came something worse. The comms crackled again. A transmission, not from the Aeons. from something else. "We have seen you, Crimson Chosen. You carry the key. The storm is coming." Then, from the darkness, a new fleet arrived. Not Aeon, not Stelothi, something older. And they had just marked humanity for war. The moment the new fleet emerged from slip space, every sensor aboard the Aegis 7 spiked off the charts. Ward barely had time to process what he was seeing. The ships weren't like anything in human records, not like the sleek, predatory Xalothi warships, nor the monolithic constructs of the Aeon Concord. These vessels were vast, jagged things, wreathed in crimson lightning, their hulls shifting as though they were half alive. They pulsed with the same eerie glow that had emanated from the monolith, and the whispers in Ward's skull became voices. Blood calls to blood. The storm will not be stopped. The Stormbreakers rise. The largest ship, a titanic war barge the size of a small moon, tilted toward them, its presence alone warping space-time. Rourke's voice was tight. Weapons lock. The pilot shook his head. Negative. They're not targeting us. Helena stepped forward, eyes locked on the alien fleet. They're waiting. Then the Aeon Concord moved. With chilling precision, the Aeon battleships reoriented, forming a defensive blockade. It was the first time Ward had ever seen them react to anything with fear. A transmission from the Aeon flagship blared through the comms. "All human vessels, retreat immediately. This is not your war. Not your war." Helena turned to Ward, eyes burning. "They're lying." And she was right, because the whispers in his head had begun to weave memories, not his own, something older. Flashes of war. Entire civilizations burned to nothing. Worlds screaming as the Stormbreakers descended, wielding weapons so terrible they rewrote the laws of reality. This wasn't humanity's war. It was everyone's. Ward gritted his teeth. "We need to know what they are." Rourke's expression darkened. "You want to get between them. Be my guest." A warning klaxon blared. The Stormbreakers fired. A single crimson lance of energy erupted from their flagship. It cut through the lead Aeon dreadnought like it was made of paper. One ship, one shot. A warship that had survived thousands of years was gone in seconds. Then the battle truly began. Aeon vessels unleashed torrents of energy fire, but the Stormbreaker fleet didn't maneuver. They absorbed the attacks, their ships feeding off the energy like a living organism. Helena's voice was barely a whisper. "They can't be stopped." Ward's fists clenched. The Aeons had tried to erase the truth, but it was too late. The prophecy had been real. The storm was here, and humanity had already been chosen. The Aegis 7 shook as the battlefield ignited around them. Explosions rippled through the void, entire Aeon warships disintegrating beneath the impossible power of the Stormbreakers' weapons. Ward gripped the console, watching in stunned horror as the titanic battle unfolded. The Aeons, self-proclaimed rulers of the galaxy, were losing. Their mighty warships, which had lorded over lesser species for millennia, were being torn apart like insects caught in a hurricane. Yet, through it all, the Stormbreaker fleet left humanity untouched. Helena was already running calculations, her fingers flying over the holo interface. Ward, they're not just attacking. She turned, eyes burning with realization. They're reclaiming territory. Ward stared at her. Territory. She exhaled sharply. The Aeons called this not our war. But it was. It always was. She gestured to the battlefield. This isn't an invasion. It's a return. The Stormbreakers were here before the Aeons. Before anyone. Ward's breath hitched. The monolith's whispers hadn't been a prophecy. They had been a warning. The comms crackled again. Another transmission. "Crimson Chosen, you are known to us." The voice wasn't human, wasn't a single voice. It was a chorus of countless entities speaking as one. Ward's blood ran cold. "Who are you?" A pause. Then, the truth. "We are what came before. We are what will remain." The Aeons stole our birthright. They feared the crimson blood. And now, we reclaim our own. A flash of pain lanced through Ward's skull. Visions. Endless, burning wars fought before time was even measured. Humanity wasn't just another species in the cosmic order. They were descendants of something older, something the Aeons had tried to erase. Rourke's voice broke through the haze. Ward, the Aeons are retreating. Ward snapped back to reality. It was true. The mighty Aeon Concord, the species that had dictated the course of galactic history for eons, was fleeing. Their remaining ships surged into slip space, abandoning the battlefield. Cowards. And yet, that should have been a victory. But it wasn't, because now, the Stormbreaker fleet turned its full attention to the Aegis 7. Helena whispered, "They want you, Ward." The lead Stormbreaker warship loomed closer, its shifting, crimson-lit hull pulsing like a beating heart. Then, the monolith's message finally completed itself in Ward's mind. Blood calls to blood. The lost will be found. The Crimson Throne will rise. A final transmission came through. It is time to come home. The Aegis 7's alarms blared. They were being pulled in. Ward had spent his life uncovering the past. Now, it had come to claim him. The Aegis 7 shuddered as an unseen force dragged it forward. The ship's engines fought against the pull, but it was pointless. The Stormbreaker flagship had them in its grasp. Thrusters at max burn. "It's not enough," the pilot shouted, panic creeping into his voice. Rourke gritted his teeth. "We need weapons online now." "Are you insane?" Helena snapped. "They just wiped out the Aeons like they were nothing. If we fire on them, we'll be dust in seconds." Ward barely heard them. The voices, the Stormbreaker's whispers, were inside his head now, growing louder with every passing second. "Crimson chosen. You cannot run from your blood." His body felt like it was burning from the inside out. His vision blurred, and suddenly, he was somewhere else. A vast, shifting landscape stretched before him. Not space, not time, but something older. He saw a war that had never ended, a civilization lost to history, wielding power that defied the natural order. The Aeons had feared them, and so they had erased them. But one bloodline had survived. Humanity, a towering figure wreathed in crimson energy, emerged from the void. Its voice was both ancient and familiar. "You are the last heir to the Crimson Throne." Ward gasped, suddenly snapping back to the Aegis 7. He collapsed onto the floor, his heart hammering. Helena was at his side instantly. "Ward, what happened?" He couldn't answer, could barely breathe. Because now, he understood. The Stormbreakers weren't here to destroy humanity. They had come to restore it. The whispers pulsed again. A choice was being given. Join them, reclaim the lost empire of the Crimson Throne, or refuse and be left behind. But Ward saw what that meant. The Aeons hadn't been saviors. They had been tyrants, terrified of what humanity had once been. If the Stormbreakers reclaimed their dominion, what would humanity become? Would they be rulers, or something far worse? The flagship loomed closer, a gaping crimson gateway opening before them. Helena gripped his arm. "Ward, what do we do?" Rourke clenched his jaw. "I don't trust these things. But if what you're saying is true, if humanity really was something more." Ward turned toward the gateway. The whispers were no longer whispers. They were commands. The weight of the choice pressed down on him. Step forward and claim the power that was once his people's, or turn away and remain what humanity had always been. For the first time in his life, Ward was afraid. The future of his species rested on his next move. And the universe held its breath.